And I mean, we need to be more active and engaged in what's going on and stop letting bureaucrats make all the decisions for our kids. Like when we're talking about, someone had asked before about like what have people been doing. Like one of the things that's coming up in Chicago, thought it was today because I quickly read an article, but it was not. They just had like a conversation about what's going on. But April 1st is going to be a day of action. Um, it's a mass day of action with the Chicago Teachers Union and other community and labor allies. And there was a conversation that took place at a rally. Actually, it was yesterday. There was a rally yesterday, and President Karen Lewis spoke among other people. But there's like, I think looking at examples too, like if we're not sure how to do something, there are really good examples of activism around these issues going on. I think what's happening in Chicago with, you have the Chicago Teachers Union, you have Black Lives Matters group, you have like groups like the Black Youth Project, you have different locals, you have the University of Professionals Illinois, you have all these different groups coming together because at the end of the day, they're very similar underlying issues. We're talking about issues of funding, teacher contracts. We're talking about increasing wages for adjunct professors and associate professors and other issues going on at the college level. I mean, there's a whole host of issues, and some of the underlying, there are commonalities across the board. So it's really awesome to see these different groups come together, also with local community members too. And like one of the things that's coming out of Chicago is the fact that they're talking about, so even though we have property taxes and funding and things like that, there's supposedly this budget crisis happening in Illinois. And they say the phrase of the night was broke on purpose, right? There's this idea that the current crisis, and this is also, if anyone has seen in the news, Chicago State, which is a historically Black college. Wait, let me take that back because I'm not sure. I think Chicago State is. I could be wrong about that. I'm wrong from time to time, but it does cater to a predominantly Black student population. But Chicago State is has not been funded in like 8 months because of this budget issue. And they're possibly going to have to lay teachers and stuff off. And when you're looking at, even though we were originally talking about K through 12 education, it's the same underlying issue. When we're talking about state schools, we're talking about funding issues, we're talking about making sure that there is access to quality education. And so for all the criticism about Bernie's plan to make college education free, to fund schools, right? Like if schools are fully funded, whether they're K through 12, early childhood, colleges, if schools are fully funded, then we don't have a disruption in opportunity, for our communities. And when we're talking about laying off teachers, we're talking about a school that has given, working single parents an opportunity, but people who maybe have had to, who didn't do as well in high school, who can get into like, a bigger, more mainstream university. I mean, it's a very good school that has turned out a lot of great people. One of them is my sister friend and colleague from high school, Tunde. She's a brilliant scholar in Chicago, blogger, and she's a Chicago State alum. And just reading through people's testimony about what the school has meant to them, we have examples of this all over the country in terms of funding issues. However, in Chicago, with the layers of corruption and issues, it becomes so you're seeing the same kind of similar issues being handled in terms of finance on the state level as a whole. When we're talking about colleges, and to some extent it would affect the public schools, but when you're talking about on the city level, you have like a parallel issue going on. So it's pretty cool to see all these different people coming together to address this issue, because at the end of the day, a lot of these issues, and I know someone had said before, like, well, my family doesn't really care about Wall Street. When you're looking at some of these people that are in charge, especially when you're talking about finance and funding, and you track like their ties and stuff, it all goes back. I understand that everyone thinks Bernie Sanders is a broken record. I understand that we don't think that the choices made on Wall Street affect our daily lives. When we look at people who are sitting in these positions in terms of and it's understandable, right? People who handle money professionally should be able to handle money in a public sector, in theory, right? They know numbers, they know investment, but there's so much more than just understanding the numbers and the investment, because some of the choices and decisions that are made by business people, by people with certain value sets, if it's not reflective of the communities that are in need to be served, then you have a serious issue. You know, I don't see value if this school is not performing, right? If this school is not performing based on these standards, what is the point of having it open? And why do we, you know, why are we investing time in it? But you know, you have a problem though with these closures and turnarounds. You have a problem though because you're removing, you know, children from teachers who they've had relationships with, who have been a part of like communities sometimes, and like there seems to be no concern for destroying community when we're talking about, oh, well, it's not productive, so we're closing your school, or you know, there's not a because the person making the decision doesn't see the value in investing the time, the energy, or the resources into helping schools and faculty and teachers and students, you know, truly put forth the best possible, you know, possibility in terms of outcomes. It's just easier for them to write it off. I mean, that's why, you know, necessarily people in business aren't necessarily become the education policy. It's not, you know, it's not necessarily the neatest thing. So I think that we need to have more people just ask questions. You know, ask questions is the best thing I can think of in terms of how as a layperson do you start getting involved in this stuff. You know, but with the CTU, with Chicago Teachers Union, they are having it's a planned 1-day strike, and it has to deal with like unfair. It's a whole host of issues, but there's also an issue in terms of, you know, how the state, how the city is engaging in terms of fair dealing with the teachers union, and that directly impacts, you know, the opportunity and the care, the service being provided to students as well. You know, it's just there's so much going on, and I don't know, Solomon, do you have any thoughts? I think
Ben muted.
Yeah, I'm here. I was just gonna
I think
say,
Dalton muted you.
I this I think this discussion is I was just kind of in awe of how great this discussion has been so far. Like I knew it was gonna go over 15 minutes, but this has been about like 40 minutes of incredible discussion tonight. I think the only thing I can say is the bottom up example really is the most practical example for bringing these changes. The community level, the school district level, bringing attention to it, and in the same way we've created these Facebook groups for Bernie, bringing doing this same level of grassroots activism to connect people's stories, experiences, and action they're taking across maybe a whole state, or across the nation who have similar problems. I think is a great way of starting that discussion and starting progress on fixing the problem, and showing to politicians this is a conversation that the voters are having and want had. And yeah.
Agreed. I think that also when we really look at like this intersection of different groups coming together, right? Like one of the things I think is so cool from everything I've followed about Chicago, whether you're talking about the Resign Rahm, you know, there are so many different activists, and there are a lot of similar underlying issues. And people are joining together across what you would think would be distinct movements. Like I don't know that people would think that traditionally, you know, a like teachers unions, right, would be involved with, you know, student activists, you know, addressing like Black Lives Matter. I don't think people traditionally think that way. People should probably look at them as like separate tracks. But you have overlap. You have collaboration happening. You know, when we saw like the major Resign Rahm protests going on, like Black Friday, for example, you had Chicago Teachers Union standing in solidarity. You had all these different groups, because you know that are standing in solidarity together, that may not necessarily have, because if we're talking about a teachers union of public school employees, right, standing with, even though it's all labor, with university employees and adjuncts and instructors, their issues aren't necessarily the same. I mean, from a labor standpoint, possibly there's some similarities, but their issues aren't necessarily the same. But at the same time, they're able to look at it in a more communicative, you know, viewpoint that brings everyone to the table. And I think those are the conversations we need to start having, because we need to be able to have people at different levels. Instead of me being mad at my kid's teacher, you know, I could kind of engage and find out what's going on, you know, to see, and as it teachers, like I tell my kids too, I'm like, your teacher has how many students? Like, you can't wait for them to talk to you. And I think for parents, I mean, I know we're all overworked. There's so much going on, but we do need to take the time to kind of just find out what's going on at our kids' school. I know it's easier said than done, but even to send in a note in a backpack, you know what I'm saying? And if you don't understand or know, if you do get a day off, and again, I know it's hard because time off is precious, and I just want to stay in my bed for as long as possible whenever I get it. But these are things that are important. If we don't engage, change is not going to happen. I just want to just I kind of forgot to let everybody know, like, Ben is off tonight. I am hosting along with Q and Solomon. We do not have access to the phones, so if you have questions, you want us to kind of engage, just make sure you drop it in the chat because we're getting them fed to us, so we can keep it going. So, like, it's just like I said, Chicago's just really interesting, and I mean there are other places too where you have collaborative action going on around stuff.
But I think
Which
Chicago is a good segue into one of the other topics we wanted to discuss, since we've almost gone an hour on the education
Well, it's
discussion
actually
in
still
the
related,
data.
so go ahead.
Yeah, which is just a final thought. Thanks, Q, for that research. That was
Yes,
amazing.
thank you. That was very
Um,
good.
and so the Chicago question that you actually mentioned, I didn't realize that these were for Chicago specifically, but the new ads that Bernie has released post
Yes.
the debate. If you have information on those, that I